can't stop thinking about this person in my seminar. How do I make the first move?
And I guess it depends a little bit really on the sex of the person who's asking the question, which I'm not entirely sure about. For men, for males specifically, it helps to be what you would consider a high value potential partner. In other words, you possess lots of attractive features. Maybe you've got some social status, you're friendly and popular, then it's much easier to engage in informal conversations. Typically, it's men who compete for selection and women who do the choosing when you look at the data. So if you are a woman and it's a man that you're interested in or someone else, then just go up and speak to them. It tends to be a lot easier to open conversations.
I saw a Tinder notification on my partner's phone. They say it's an old profile and they don't use it anymore, but I don't know what to think. What should I do?
So there's some interesting data that looks at I think, if I remember correctly off the top of my head, an international average figure is between about 15 and 20% of profiles on Tinder are already involved in sort of committed romantic relationships. So I guess open communication, find out what it is with a little bit of skepticism because, infidelity does happen.
Is it okay for my partner to be following and liking girls' pictures on Instagram?
It depends upon the boundaries that you've set in your relationship. Yes, it can be okay, but if your partner's using that and then engaging in conversation rather than just simply liking, then it can lead to something a little bit more than simply liking photographs.
My partner is always so protective of their phone. Should I be worried?
It might just be the case that they have boundaries. If you expect to go through someone's phone, then it could be an indicator that you don't trust your partner. Again, that's not to say that you don't have a reason for distrust, because sometimes infidelity does occur.
My partner never posts me on social media. Is this a red flag?
No, not necessarily. If there's lots of things that they post about their private life and they're very open, then maybe you can ask why that's the case. Or maybe they want to keep that part of their life private for whatever reason that might be.
Why does my boyfriend always choose his friends over me?
In our ancestral past, typically we lived in small group communities. If you look at chimpanzee communities, you see people building really strong coalitional groups, in part, especially for male coalition building. It might also be the case that there's an element of caution, especially if the relationship is relatively new, and it can be a costly strategy to lose your friends in the hopes the relationship lasts when it might not in fact last.
I crossed the line with my flatmate the other day. I think I like them, but I don't know what to do because we live together. What should I do?
Okay, so this is a tricky one. So it depends, right? One of the interesting findings is that men more than women over-perceive the interest of the person that they're talking to. So if, say for example, you're engaged in a conversation or you have a close relationship with someone, then men more than women interpret that to be something more than just friendship. You see the opposite. If you're a woman, tends to be the case that you underestimate the perceived attraction. If it goes well, great, I'm glad it did, but just be a little bit cautious because this sort of revelation can change relationships fundamentally.
Why is dating so difficult nowadays?
Oh, okay, this is a good one. So there's something called sexual selection, okay, and it's a force of evolution, which is to say that those traits which are preferred by one sex and are selected get passed on to the next generations. Combine that with something that's called parental investment theory, which basically states that the more expensive and difficult it is to raise children, the more selective people become over their potential partners. In the modern environment, if you add in something like Tinder, where you have literally an entire city's worth of potential options, women have a slightly higher preference for resource provisioning, the amount of resources you can bring to raise an offspring, and men have a slightly larger preference for physical attractiveness. So on average, it makes dating really hard for men. They tend to get very few matches in online dating, but it also means that for women, the men that they typically want are also desired by lots and lots of other women. Well, thanks for the questions, and I hope everyone has the best of luck in the dating world. I know it can be a little bit difficult and taxing at times, but just keep going, and I know for the most part there's someone out there, so good luck.